So, yeah.
Welcome to the podcast, Hilly. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm Jana from Pearl Together, and this is Hilly Sluis. Hopefully, I said your name properly.
Yeah, it's van der Sluis, but it's really
Oh,
difficult for
wait,
you. No
say that
problem.
again.
No.
Van der Sluis.
Yeah, it's almost impossible for you to pronounce. It's a real Dutch name, and now you can't help that.
I have not been trained in the way of Dutch, but you have fantastic chocolate.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
We have fantastic chocolate and dropjes, licorice.
oh,
Very nice. Yeah,
my
and I think
husband would
other
love
things.
that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So we'll just say welcome to the podcast, Hilly. Thank you for joining me on. I'm really was pleased when you agreed to come and chat with us about your design. So
Yeah.
we want to talk to you about your Ripples sweater.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's fantastic, and I like a boxy sweater that kind of I have the middle-aged 50-something-year-old body, and I'm happy that it's just kind of hides all the things I want to hide.
Yeah, exactly. The same for me. I don't like the very tight things, and I like it to be a bit boxy, and it's comfortable. It's a comfortable sweater. That's really important as well. I think it's nice to wear.
Yes, I just want to make myself like the everyday comfortable sweater. I can just wear a t-shirt underneath and
Yeah,
put it on, and it's not really heavy, and
no,
it's
exactly.
lovely, and a little color on the bottom, a little color on the cuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like the very, very colorful things. The color I'm wearing is about the brightest I have, I think.
Yeah.
So the very muted colors are the ones that I like a lot. And with the ripple sweaters, it's only a speck of color every now and then, and not too much, and that's what I like best. And I also like the fact that it's not a really difficult sweater to knit. I do like the basic kind of sweaters most, because they're nice to wear and easy to knit. It's not a difficult sweater to knit.
No, and we're going to learn some things along the way. I have not knitted a sweater in this way. Like we talked about this a moment ago before I pushed record. This sweater is knitted for viewers. This sweater is knitted from the bottom up. So you go round and round until you separate for the sleeves.
Yeah,
And then the back and the front are knitted back and forth.
yeah,
And then 3 needle bind off at the
yeah.
shoulders. And then you do the neck.
Yeah, you do the neck first. After you finish the body, you do the neck first. The reason I do that is because you can try it on and you can have a look if it works the way you did it, and then you continue with the sleeves. And I think that's a good way to know if you like the neckline. And I also want to say something about the neck, the bind off of the neck. You can play with that a little. Some people bind off very loosely, some bind off very tightly, and it makes a world of difference. And people tend to think, okay, this sweater, it isn't working, I don't like the neckline, throw it in a corner and do something else. And that's really a shame,
Yes.
because I think if you're not satisfied with how it is, then you undo the bind off and do it again
Yeah.
until you're satisfied with the result. And
Yeah,
the
it
same.
definitely changes things.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Now you could even, if you think it's too wide for me, too tight, you could even consider picking up more or less stitches. But I think the bind off is, well, that's the moment that you can make the difference. So
Yes.
that's really important.
Yeah, I found it interesting that, and you touched on this earlier, that after you do that and then you're ready for the sleeves, you're knitting the sleeves from the cuff up, not picking up and going the other way. But you explained to me why, and that makes sense. So talk about that if you will.
Well, normally I would pick up the stitches because I hate sewing pieces together as much as any other knitter. Probably, I don't know many knitters that don't hate finishing
Yeah.
techniques. Um, but in this case, because of the pattern, it is well because you knit from the bottom up. I think you should do the sleeves from the bottom up as well because that gives the most similar results,
Right.
and
Yeah.
also because you do knit and purl, and when you turn that around, you can see a little bit the difference when you
Right.
go from top to bottom in this
Right.
case.
So that consistency of knitting in the same direction is important. And you can tell the direction of knitting,
Yeah,
because the stitches are like
yeah,
V's
but
and then they're
normally you
the
wouldn't
other way.
see. Yeah, normally you wouldn't see if you do just the stockinette stitch, you wouldn't see that, and it's that's the way I do it. I pick up the stitches, make it easy for myself. So normally I would do that, but in this case I turned it around, and it might be nice to discuss in the knit along how to attach the sleeves to
Yes.
the
That
body.
it will be a learning opportunity for all of
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
So, well, I'll figure out how I want to do it and I'll show people how I choose to do it.
Yeah,
But then there's lots of ways. I don't
yeah,
have a lot of finishing practice. As we talked about the sweater I just made for my mom, I made her do that.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
if you can find someone, that's perfect as well, of course. But not.
You find someone else, make my mom do it for me.
But also in this case, with setting in the sleeves, it's really important that you take your time for it. You were talking about swatching. That's really important. That's the start of your sweater, but the finish of your sweater is uh, as important as the start,
Yeah.
because if you're not satisfied with how you setting your sleeves, then well, it might not work. You might not like it. It might be not stretchy enough. So it is really important to take the time and do that properly. And
Yes.
well, that's something to
Absolutely.
knit along.
Yes, definitely. So let's
Yeah.
back up for a moment. I'm curious to know first how you started knitting and then also how you began designing.
I started knitting as a child in school with cotton yarn and those awful metal
Oh,
needles, tiny sweaty hands, and you couldn't get the yarn over the point of the needle. It was awful,
terrible.
and we had the white cotton so that you could see it, it became really dirty with the sweaty hands, and it wasn't fun. I did have a very nice teacher, so that helped. But so I learned as a child, and then in my teenage years, I knitted really a lot. I knitted sweaters and all kinds of things, and I also did some sewing. I made my own clothes. That was really the time that you did that, the 80s,
Oh,
and
yes. Yes.
yeah. Well, then for a couple of years I didn't knit, and when my children came, I started knitting again. Then I joined Stitch and Bitch group
Yes. That's
years
fun.
ago. Yeah, and
And I
met
love that you
Debbie
call it that.
Stoller.
I call it that here. When we have local gatherings, we call it Stitch and Bitch also.
Okay, okay, yeah. Well, it was started by Debbie Stoller in America, I think, and so I did that for a couple of years, and then I was co-owner of a company. We gave classes in knitting techniques and things like that. So that was my introduction into professional knitting, I'd
Yeah.
call it. And I did that for a couple of years, but I'm not really keen on giving classes. I don't know. It's not really it. it became clear it wasn't my thing.
Okay, sure.
So
Well, designing is not my thing. I would rather teach your designs than do that
yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah. Well, let me design. That's perfect.
Okay.
That's no problem. And you
Yeah,
teach.
that's wonderful. That's great.
Yeah. Well, and I started designing a little bit when I was in that company. And then later on, I worked in a yarn shop for a couple of years, and
Mhm.
designing became more and more important. I'm not working at the yarn shop anymore. And now I'm fully focused on designing and knitting. And
That's
that's
wonderful.
what I like best, I guess.
That's great. Well, I found your pattern through Anne Frost,
Yeah.
and she started it. She was looking at it and started knitting her ripple sweater when we were doing our podcast in December. We were doing our daily countdown to the new year. And that's when I became interested. That's how I found you, was through Anne. And then I
Yeah.
really liked this sweater. And then I put it out to my patrons. I'm like, what should we do for the next knit along? And I had a list of 3 or 4 patterns. And a lot of people said, oh, I want to knit that. And so I'm like, okay, let's knit that.
Great. Well, I feel very honored that you chose my pattern.
Oh, it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, and I wanted, well, selfishly, I wanna knit it, I don't wanna knit it for myself. The other thing I think is wonderful about your pattern is I really like the initial original colors, you can I love the light gray,
Yeah.
but I also think that your design lends itself to lots of varieties if people
Yeah.
want to have their own. I saw there's one project so far on Ravelry where someone did it in a darker gray and then
Yeah.
had some like pink and white and brighter colors at the bottom. I thought that looked really nice. I think there's endless possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And someone did that's also on Ravelry, did something with the neckline. She put some color in the neck because she said it's too pale for me, and she put some color in the neck, and that's really nice as well. That's also a
Oh.
possibility. And I do like to see all the different sweaters.
Mhm.
I'm into blues and greens and the pale colors, but
Mhm.
you can also do a very bright color. It
Yeah.
will work in all kinds of colors, I think.
Yeah, because I think in my case, the light gray, I've always loved gray, but the more pale I get, then I feel a little bit like washed out, like it's all, so a little darker color for me might be better.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I must say that now that my hair is becoming a bit colorless,
yeah,
uh, I
yeah,
tend to go to. But you are really you have a very beautiful gray color. I'm
thank you.
pepper and salt. You are right. The colors change. The colors that suit you change over the years, and I tend to go to darker colors now. But well, the ripples I made a couple of years ago, and
That's lovely.
if I had to do it again, I might choose something with a bit of a darker color around my neck. But well, it is
Well,
as it is.
yeah.
I hardly wear it because it's in a yarn shop in the Netherlands, and so I don't get the chance to wear it very often. But
Now,
that's
where are you? Where are you right now? Where are you joining me from?
from Amersfoort, and Amersfoort is the center of the Netherlands, near Utrecht. Utrecht is always called the center. It's bang in the middle. Yeah, yeah, and it's a very nice city with a lot of historic buildings. I'm in the outskirts. It's not as nice as in the city center, but it's a nice place to live. Yeah.
Now, some of your patterns incorporates Bohus knitting. Am I
Hmm.
saying that wrong? I'm saying that wrong.
I don't know how you pronounce it in Swedish. I think Stickning, something like that. But
Okay.
I say Bohus knitting. Bohus is really, those patterns are really very intricate with very many colors. I do have an example here.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Of,
Oh, that
um, and then you can see how many colors there are in this example. These are wrist warmers, and this is the kind of yarn they used in the old days. It's a blend of angora and wool,
Okay.
and some of them are even 100% angora. I can't remember what this one is. I made them a long time ago. This is only, you can consider it a swatch of what you could do with it. You can make entire sweaters with it. And then you can understand that I say that the ripple sweater is only a tiny, tiny bit of what the Bohus technique enhances. So
So how would you describe the technique?
the technique is they use many colors in one row. It depends on which design. They have very many different designs. Some are fairly simple, and some are very much with many colors in a row, up to 7 colors in a row, I believe.
Wow.
It's not the thing I like. I know that I it took a long time to knit these because the colors are very close together. I don't think you can see it here now because it is becoming a bit dark, but these are the colors that I used in this, and you can see that
That's lovely.
these are 2 different blues, and sometimes you even have to number them because you hardly see the difference between the different colors. I can show you a book I could recommend to people.
Oh,
I don't know if it's for sale
okay.
anymore. I bought it a couple of years ago, I think
Mhm.
6 years ago. I can show you. Well, this is, for example, the sweater
Oh, that's
with
amazing.
the wrist warmers were. No, it's not this one. It's a different one. Even, well, it doesn't matter. They have very many different patterns and in very many colors. But what Bohus does is they use knit and purl stitches, and they combine stranded color work or color work. They also purl stitches, and if you purl a row and then you knit a row on top of it or the other way around, then it it does something with the purl bumps that are in your knitting, and that's what they use a lot, and that makes it really well, very special. I made a pattern for the Shetland Wool Week annual
Oh,
2019,
okay.
and I called it Shetland meets Bohus, pair of mittens.
Oh, that's
The
amazing.
mittens here with me. They are at Oradale, and the other ones are at the yarn shop in the Netherlands. So I don't have them here. But what I did is I combined the Fair Isle technique
Mhm.
with the Bohus technique, and
Wow.
so I combined the color work. But I also introduced some pearl stitches, and if you do that in certain places, it gives a special effect to the knitwork.
Yeah.
And this looks a little bit like Bohus, but it's absolutely not the real thing, because the real thing
Okay.
is really with very many colors. And but I liked the link, to link them together, a bit of a fusion of 2 techniques. So that's when I started using the bows. Well, it was a little bit earlier. I don't know, a few years before that, I was introduced to that, and we went to Boesland and to Boesland's museum, where you can see the real thing, and that was really, really special.
Mm.
So beautiful, those sweaters, and they made tams and gloves and things like that, and that was,
Amazing.
yeah, it's really a very fascinating. Well, we call it a technique, and it is, yeah, it is a technique, but you can't say, oh, knit and purl and then it's Bohus. That's not how it works.
Right. Right.
There were very many different designs, and some of them were quite simple and very, very geometrical, and some were more like blue shimmer, for instance. That's the one that was from the wrist warmers. It's almost like a halo, a
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
because of the yarn, of course.
With the Angora. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
That's
I
lovely.
visited the farm as well, the Angora farm. There are still, you can still, I think, I think you can still buy kits from the museum.
Oh, okay.
And there is a lady who has a farm with Angora rabbits,
Mhm.
and she makes the yarn for these kind of kits, and that's really beautiful. And the rabbits have a really good life. It's animal friendly, and it's, the yarn is really beautiful, and
Lovely. Yeah.
very, very expensive. But well, yeah, if you want to have a project and you have the money to spend, it's really beautiful.
So we were talking, you and I were talking about swatching, and you have used the Uradale yarn for your pattern, and I think that we talked about the importance of swatching because the gauge that you recommend is 23 stitches for 10 centimeters, and so for us in the U.S. that's 23 stitches over 4 inches, or 5 3/4 stitches per inch. However, I'm swatching, and I'm still working on my swatch, so this is not the color I will use for viewers. This is not the color I'll use for my sweater, but it is the yarn that I was considering, and I'm unsure now. But this is the importance of swatching because my gauge is very different than yours, and that's okay. I'll work it out, but that's the importance of doing that before you ever cast on your sweater, obviously.
Yeah,
Um, you knit very differently than I do, and like you mentioned earlier, it depends if you're swatching back and forth or you're swatching in the round. Now this pattern, you're going to be doing both,
yeah,
knitting in the
yeah,
round and
yeah,
knitting back and forth, but it depends on whether you have metal needles or wooden needles, or you know
yeah.
there's not, or don't knit angry either.
No.
So it really depends. I need to do some more work. So for me, this is the 3.25 millimeter or US 3. This is US 4 or 3.5 millimeter. And I'm still not where I want to be. I may change yarn. This is a very light fingering that I'm trying out. I may go to a sport or a heavier fingering.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And it's not entirely in stockinette. Even the part that doesn't have the color anymore still has some pearl stitches.
the
So
ripples, yeah, because you're still having the ripples throughout the
yeah,
sweater.
yeah,
And introducing those pearl stitches will make a difference in your swatch. So for me, I'm knitting just a very basic swatch. However, uh, the swatch needs to be as if you took a cookie cutter and just took a big stamp right out of the middle of the sweater and then held it up. Like you
yeah,
just cut out a bit. It needs to be representative of the whole project.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
will spend some time swatching, and if people choose not to, well, then I guess they're living dangerously. And
Yeah, well, the advantage is that it's not a tight fit sweater, so you can, well, you can play
yeah.
a little bit with, if you have one stitch more or less, it probably will be fine. But and if you have a small size and you want to go up a little, that's of course possible. You can choose another size. That's also possible, as long as it's not entirely the other end of the spectrum.
Right,
But I
right.
think that might work. And like I said, it's a loose fit sweater, so that helps a little bit as well, I guess.
Yeah, and I was very happy to see that you've released the pattern, or by the time this podcast goes live, you will have released
I
a
have released it. Yeah, yeah,
good on Ravelry. Now it goes up to a double X, which is I think the bust was 145 centimeters. Okay. And we can do math. That's
yeah.
divided by 2.5 stitches per, or inches, centimeters per inch is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I don't have the inches with the pattern, but
No,
it's
no, but we can manage that, and I'll talk about that on the podcast. So your new size is 145 centimeters divided by 2.5. That's 58 inches for a bust size. So that's good. I was pleased. I'm not a small person. I was pleased about that.
yeah, and you still have some positive ease. That's really
Yes.
important. You want to have a very comfortable sweater, a cozy sweater, and not one that's really tight. That's not the pattern. Ah, hello.
Okay. Okay. This is Peanut. He's been on the podcast before. He's very large.
He
He,
wants to join.
he does. He likes to just sit right here like a baby. He
Yeah,
likes to
well,
just sit. He wants to
really.
just sit. That's all. He would sit most of the day if I let him.
Ah, okay, yeah.
I
You
mean,
wouldn't get any knitting done then.
well, if I lean back, I've learned. I've learned to
Ah,
do
okay.
that.
I can remember that I was listening to a radio broadcast where I don't know, I want to listen to that, but that was really late at night. And I thought, well, I must see if I can lie down and do some knitting. And I could. It's not,
That's
that's
fantastic.
the advantage of not having long needles, and circular needles work fine. So, yeah. About I was thinking about you start knitting in the round with the sweater, and then you divide front and back when you are at the armholes.
Right.
Some people use more yarn when they do the purl row.
Yes. Yes.
So um, that's a moment that they have to beware of. That if they have that problem, then the gauge might differ from the part that was knitted in the round. So
Yes. So swatching both ways in the round and back and forth is beneficial because you may need to change your needles
yeah,
when you separate, and that's fine. We are knitters. We are the boss of our own projects. We're flexible.
yeah.
So it's okay if you need to change needles at the point where you separate for the sleeves. You may have to do that to maintain the same tension throughout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I know from myself that there's in my case there's hardly any difference, so I can continue. But if you do have that, then
Right.
it's important to pay attention to
Yeah.
that.
It's certainly worthwhile to
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
because you're using both, both in this particular project. So
yeah.
that's a very good point. And then the sleeves are in the round. So
The sleeves are in the round. Yeah, yeah. All that I can do without having to sew things together, I do in the round. And but in this case, the front and the back, you could do it, but then you would have to make steeks, and that's a lot of work as well. I
right,
wouldn't want to do that. And
right,
it's easy because it's only one color. If you have many colors, then it's different. But if you only have one color, it makes sense to go back and forth.
right. Sure. Absolutely. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your design. It was really delightful to meet you.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you are going to use my sweater for the knit along, and
I'm excited. It is not I've knitted sweaters, but they're mostly top down raglan. So I'm excited to try something new and
yeah,
to have everyone join me doing that. I do knit alongs with things I want to make.
yeah, that's a good choice. I think
Yeah.
knit what you would like to knit. It's
Yes.
a long process, and you have to like the process. So,
Right.
but I wish you and all the other knitters lots of fun with the knit along. And if there are any questions, well, how to
We
find me.
will we will find you if I have questions while I'm going through this with the pattern and while
Yeah,
I'm creating the tutorials, then we know how to find you.
exactly.
Wonderful.
Oh, okay. Well,
Thank
thank you for
you.
having me.
Thanks for coming.